Hey there, and welcome back to Podcasting for Educators. I have a really great episode for you all today. Chrissy Beltran is here to talk all about her unique podcast journey, and she has so many good things to share with you all. She's been podcasting for over 5 years now. Chrissy has 20 years of experience in elementary education, including 9 years teaching third and fourth graders and 5 years as a campus literacy coach. After her kids were born, Chrissy transitioned into coaching, consulting, and resource creation, including 2 courses for instructional coaches and over 300 resources for coaches and teachers. Through her resources, online courses, and podcast, Instructional Coaching with Miss B, Chrissy teaches coaches how to design their coaching program, build an action plan, and implement strategies from their coaching strategy toolbox. Plus, she's got a special spot in her heart for literacy coaches. So you'll hear her talk to us about why she got started, how she recently changed the name of her podcast, how her planning process has changed over the years, and how she uses seasons to support her planning process. I know that I've gotten some questions from some of you about whether or not you should do seasons with your show, so this is going to be really interesting for you to hear. Chrissy has also landed sponsors for her podcast in addition to promoting her own products and resources. And she's sharing some behind the scenes information about her sponsorship experience, how she landed these sponsors, how she found the right fit sponsors, and what her packages look like. Let's go ahead and dive into the episode. Your podcast is a powerful tool that serves your audience and your business. But how do you manage it all, bring in new listeners, and convert those listeners into customers? That's what this show is all about. Welcome to Podcasting for Educators. I'm Sarah Whitaker, classroom teacher turned podcast manager, and I'm here to help you get the most out of your show, all while making an impact on other educators. Welcome to the podcast, Chrissy. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
Of course. So we're going to talk about all kinds of things today when it comes to your experience with podcasting. The listeners heard in the intro how you support instructional coaches, so they know a little bit about you, but can you kind of start things off by giving us an overview of your podcast? I know that you just recently decided to do a little name change. So tell us a little bit about your show, who it's for, and also why you decided to change the name.
Absolutely. So whenever I started my show, it was 2020, and it was actually right before COVID. It was right before everybody else started their podcast.
Yeah.
I started mine like 2 months prior to that. So I started out with Buzzing with Miss B, the coaching podcast, because my store name has been Buzzing with Miss B since 2011. So I was serving a wide audience of people in that store. And I felt like, I don't know, it's a good place to start with like a name that's already established because people do search for it. And that's where a lot of my traffic comes from. So I thought I'll start with that. And then I'll add the coaching podcast because it kind of targets that specific audience because I had multiple audiences in my store. It's just been around a long time. So as my job changed, so did my target audience. And so then recently I was thinking about, I'm really focused on instructional coaches and I want to do a really good realignment of kind of what I'm focusing on. And so I was kind of putting out content that was just all about instructional coaching, right? It was really broad. Anything connected to instructional coaching was like, okay, that falls in my umbrella. And so I've been thinking about really redefining and narrowing that content down over the last year or so. And it was hard for me to do because I just like to talk shop, if that makes sense. I really like to talk about work. And so I thought, okay, I really want to target this. And one of the things that I'm doing to really target that is just changing the name to make it a little more obvious that that's who my target audience is. And also for searchability reasons, because despite instructional coaching being a keyword in practically every paragraph, it's just helpful to have it in the name. So it's now Instructional Coaching with Miss B. And then I'm also going to put, my personal name, Chrissy Beltran, is going to be on the graphic. And then Buzzing with Miss B will be like in the owner or the author, I guess. So that way I kind of cover all the bases because whatever people are searching for, hopefully one of those things will pop up.
Yeah, I think that that's so smart. And like you said, even though you have that keyword maybe in other places like your description or your episode titles and things like that, I do find that the title of the show carries like a little bit more weight when it comes to search. So I think that that's super smart. And it's just nice to hear from you who has been podcasting for a while now. I think it's important for people to hear, a lot of people get hung up when they first get started on what exactly like their exact format of their show is going to be and exactly who it's for and exactly what topics they're going to cover. And I always try to tell people like, yes, you want to get clear on that from the beginning, but you also, it's going to change a little bit over time and you're going to get a couple years into it and you're going to realize that you want to tweak some things or kind of tighten up your messaging, maybe narrow in on a specific topic more. So it's cool to hear your experience and see like the direction that your show is going. So is it still like pretty much for the same audience that you started with for the most part though?
It is for the same audience. What I kind of refined is some of the topics that we look at. And so I'm really focused now on kind of making sure that my information is categorized into one of these major categories. So I have helping coaches define their coaching programs, helping them build a differentiated action plan, and then implementing strategies and building their own coaching toolbox full of strategies. And then also I do feature literacy coaches because when I started as a coach, that's what I was.
Yeah.
So I do kind of go back to that at least once a year and do a few episodes really targeting that specific role. So that's kind of how I'm looking at my content throughout the year. And I'm going to have other things because, you know, you deal with emotions and that is tangentially connected to your strategies and you deal with, you know, all these different things that are kind of connected and related. But the majority of my content, I want to fit into those kind of buckets because that's where my main resources are.
Yes. So smart. That was going to be my next question. What are you first of all, why did you start in the first place? And from like a business perspective, what are you kind of driving your listeners to?
So I started in the first place because my friend told me to.
Love it.
I was, you know, buzzing with a bee. I had shifted into making more resources for instructional coaches, but I was still making literacy resources because I was a literacy coach at the time. And then I left working full time to take care whenever I was pregnant with our first daughter. That was 6 years ago. So I left at that time to take care of her and be a work from home mom. And I have been so thankful for that, all of that. And at that time, I was talking to a friend of mine who was a coach, and she goes, well, you should have a podcast. I've been listening to Cult of Pedagogy, and I feel like you could do something like that, but you would also have humor and, you know, personality and all these things. And it just kind of stuck to me, and I kept thinking about it. And I finally just thought, yeah, I love podcasts. I listen to podcasts every single day for as much time as I can cram it in. And so why wouldn't I? That's a great medium. I may not be the best speaker, but I do love to talk. So, you know,
Yeah.
we take advantage of what we can do. And so I thought, why not? I can absolutely do that. It's long form content that is marketable for years. It's just going to sit there. It's like blog posts that I wrote in 2012 are still driving traffic. So, you know, we have to take advantage of those opportunities we have. And I thought that's a great way to do it. So that's kind of how that came about. And then what was the second part of your question?
Oh my gosh. I know. I was just thinking about what you were saying. What was the second part of my question? Oh, what exactly you drive people to?
So the things that I drive people to are, I have a couple of courses, and then I also have a large bank of resources. I have my own shop now. And so I have a Teachers Pay Teacher store that I've had since like 2011, or 2012, but I also have my own shop. And so I started to redirect people to that because I was directing them to TPT until I built my shop this past year. So now I'm sending people that way. And then I also I realigned all my email funnels. And so those are now driving either to one of the big courses that I have. So like the designing your coaching role and your coaching program, all of that is leading to my startup course. And then I also have a course for literacy coaches. And then I'm working on a book that's going to be where my coaching strategy toolbox funnel is going to end up. And so for now, those are just going to resources that are connected to that. But once I have a book, it's going to lead to that.
Awesome. So exciting. I love like how over the years you just kind of build out all these different funnels and streams of income. It's so cool.
It is really an amazing, I mean, the possibilities are endless. So whatever you
Yeah.
like to do, you can find a way to do that. If you like to create resources, if your courses were up your alley, if you like to do video, there's ways to use your podcast to promote all of that. And then you don't, like you said earlier, you don't have to have the perfect idea of what it looks like. You just start. And then you what is it? Done is better than perfect.
Yes.
And so the perfect unpublished podcast isn't going to get you any listens.
Exactly.
So, yeah. You just get it out there.
Even if you sit on it for months or years waiting for it to be perfect, you still have to start at some point, and it's still going to take time to build that listenership no matter when you start. So you might as well do it now.
That's right. You still look back and go, wow, I'm not going to do any of those things
Yes.
anymore. I'm going to do this completely different thing. And that's okay because, your audience will either follow you or you will find the people who want to do that.
Exactly. Exactly. So such good advice. Do you also do one-on-one coaching at all?
I do some of that, but not very much. Most of my coaching has been group coaching. I was doing consulting with schools in my area, but whenever COVID started, I kind of lost the very limited childcare that I did have. And so I'm still a work from home mom. Now I have a 2-year-old. And so twice a day, she's in a short program for a few hours. And that's whenever I do my recording and anything that requires not a 2-year-old to be napping in the next room. I mean, you can record whenever they're napping, but you never know when that will end. So I try to avoid it when I can. So I do have other kinds of revenue streams, such as, work with schools and things like that, but that's very, very limited just due to our family situation right now. So most of my stuff is virtual and it's not usually live if I can avoid it.
Yeah, same. I try to avoid most live stuff because it never fails that if you plan something live, your kid's going to get sick that day.
Yep, absolutely. And
It
you've been
always
promoting
happens.
it for a month and
Yes.
there they are with an ear infection. So yep.
Exactly. But like you said earlier, there's so many possibilities of other things that you can do where you don't have to show up live, which is what I love about podcasting. Can kind of
Yes.
do it in little pockets of time. Okay, so you kind of touched a little bit on this, but now that you've had your podcast for 5 years now, how has your planning process kind of changed over the years?
It has changed a lot. When I first started, I was just like, well, let's just see what happens. And I remember I, listened to many episodes about starting up your own podcast. And they said you should have a bank of 4 episodes just ready to drop at once so people can kind of binge listen and get hooked and follow you. So I did that. And then every week after that, I was like, what are we going to talk about this week?
Yes.
So it was just kind of organic. And it just sort of over time, it has evolved to where now I do batch planning. And I know I've listened to your episodes about batch planning, pros and cons, and I do batch planning for pretty much the whole year. And I do record all of my episodes from like January to April for the year. And so that has worked for me because I feel both of my my babies came early, very early in one case. And so I feel better when things are done way early. And so that has helped me a lot. And even though it sounds a little nutty, it's worked out for us. So what I do is I send out I do have seasons. And so then at the end of my season in November, I send out a survey, like a Google form to the people in my email list and also to Instagram or wherever. And then I start doing some keyword research. I have a VA who actually does some keyword research for me. And then I use those, the Google form, I use, where I'm heading, like I realign my pillars this year. And then I use the survey results and I try to build topics around there. And I literally write them all now. I didn't do this before. I write all the topic ideas on a stick, like each one gets a little tiny sticky note.
Okay.
Then I look at them and I group them into categories because my show has like mini series all year. So it'll have like 4 or 5 episodes about one topic. So like 4 or 5 episodes about working with your administration. And we delve into different aspects of that. And so then all of the individual ideas come from one of those little stickies. So I make my categories and then I look at my calendar. So I have a massive Google sheet. And this I did start doing in the beginning. And I'm glad I did because it's all there. So I do recommend having some sort of document where you just keep track of your episodes, when they came out, your links, and just like basic what's in there,
Yes.
So I have that. And then I go through and I plan out all of the dates for the upcoming season, which my season runs February to November. And then I look at, okay, this is where this topic is going to go because I'm going to be launching this resource at that time. And then I also in that sheet include what my opt-ins are going to be. And so it's a really good time to reevaluate my opt-ins and say, okay, I need to make sure I have something new for this because this is a big push I'm doing and I don't have something I like. And then I can plug in all the episode topics, opt-ins, all of the resources that I'm going to promote, anything like that to make sure that it's all prepared for whenever I go planning each individual episode.
I'm obsessed. I love this process. What I love about it is because I think sometimes the problem that people run into when they batch is that they're not looking at things from a big picture. They're just kind of like sitting down and batching a bunch of episode recordings, but you're doing it in such a smart way where you are kind of doing that backward design approach where you're really having to look at your business and how your podcast is going to play into your business and where you want to lead people, what opt-ins you want to promote, which I think is so smart. I am getting ready. I'll be going on maternity leave in a few months at the time of this recording. And so I'm in the process of that right now. By next month, I'll have like recordings through probably July or August, which feels really exciting.
Yes. It's like almost like it's just this huge relief. And then
Yeah.
whenever like right now I'm in the process of setting up for my new season because my season February to November, right? So I'm working on getting those episodes recorded. And it's almost like a bingo game where I want to fill up my board.
Yes.
So I just like whenever I can type in that little box where I have a little box on my sheet that either has the date I'm recording or, the information if I have a guest, like, oh, I sent the questions or whatever, and we're recording on this date, or I sent an email requesting them, but I haven't heard back, or it has done written in that box. And the minute that I can write done in all the boxes, you're just like, I'm done. It feels so great. It's just this wonderful feeling of like accomplishment. And now I'm like, okay, now I can put my energy somewhere else. And this is ready and I can build around it and I can focus on promoting it and I can focus on my emails and focus on adding new resources to my store and things like that because I already have my episodes. And I know, like you said, I'm working backwards from product launches, my course launches. And so because I have that information, I can make sure that I organically mention it throughout the episode because the topic is connected. And then I can also make sure that I have my ads recorded that are my own personal ads for my own things that I want to have in that episode.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. I'm like nodding my head over here with everything you say. And I have a few follow-up questions. So and actually let me back up just to clarify. So you do your season from February to November, and those are weekly episodes, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then for your courses, do you do live launches or are they kind of open all year?
It's varied. I have the startup course is a live launch because it's a very specific, you're only going to need it at a specific time, pretty much the beginning of the school year, possibly again in January. So I do a live launch at those times. And then the other course, it's open, but I run coupons in my emails, or sometimes I've just lowered the price and promoted it that way. I've done different things with the literacy coaching course.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, this process, like it just forces you to look ahead and to be 5 steps ahead of where you currently are. And then everything just kind of like pieces together so nicely. Then you've got your podcast episodes. It's your long form content. You can use that for your emails, for your social media posts, all of that. Do you ever use coupons in like when you create ads for your own resources? Do you ever play around with doing coupons to kind of track traffic from the podcast?
I'm not sure. I don't think I've done it directly from the podcast, and I probably could. What I usually do is I promote an opt-in, like a video course.
Mm-hmm.
I promote something like that, and then that course has the coupon in it. And I think what I've said is join the course, get the coupon, something like that. But I don't think I've directly done it from the podcast, but I probably could. I could just call it podcast code or something like that. And then that's the code that they get. Yeah, I could use that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it, love it, love it. So then you're off December and January. So during December and January, which is the period that we're in right now at the end of January. So you're right now on those off months preparing for the upcoming season.
Okay. I do. Honestly, in December, I don't do a ton.
Yeah.
Because that is, like I mentioned, work from home mom, kids are home half the time in that month. And I just like to spend time with my family. So I take time off in December at the end of the month. So I try to kind of start getting things ready. Like I know where I'm headed, but I don't do a ton of recording or anything like that at that time. January is whenever I really sort of hit the ground running because I've set myself up in December for what my plan is going to be when I do start again in January. So that's kind of like my natural season, I guess, is February to November. And then December is just kind of like, okay, what's happening?
Yes.
So
what day is it?
Yeah. So I like having the seasons because they are a place to kind of stop and reflect. And it's like a natural stopping point for me. And I feel like if I didn't have a season, it's like having a school year because you can change things throughout the school year. But when you have the end of the school year coming, you stop and really think, how am I going to start differently next year? And it's because of that natural stopping place, I feel like I've been able to make changes every season.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're getting that feedback from your audience too. And then you have that time to reflect on that. And I mean, December, I'm the same way in December. It's like, I just want to shut everything down. I need my time. I need my family time. And downloads aren't usually great in December for podcasts anyway. So if you're going to take a month off, it's a great month to do it.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe someday I'll start again in January once my kids are a little bigger, but at this time February's worked for us because it gives me a month to get everything back in gear.
Yes, I know. There's always, I feel like it's, at least for me, especially with kids, and you probably relate, like, it's kind of this myth that, December comes around and then you suddenly feel rejuvenated in January. Like, I definitely
Mhm.
did not feel like that this year.
No, I feel like it takes by the time the kids go back to school, which could be
Yeah.
anywhere from like the 3rd to the 10th,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
And then you're like, okay, what's happening?
Yes. And then like this year we got snow right after they went back to school for I think like 1 or 2 days and then it started snowing. And so winter break was just extended even more.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely a time of figuring things out. That's the way I look at it. January is when I get everything figured out. I start recording and then, after that I'm on a roll. But January is like my restart time. And I know people are like, "Oh, make your plan in December so you," and I do to a degree, but I feel like I can really I have that time away in December so that I can come back in January and kind of figure out, okay, this is what I really want it to look like. This is what I was thinking, but now I've had some time to kind of dwell on that and I can actually, refine that plan and make it better.
Yes. And so do you like on your last episode in November, do you announce, hey, we're going to be taking that break. This is the
Yes,
date that I'll come back.
I do. I do. And I also put that in my emails
Yeah.
that, remember our season ends in November, but I'm going to be back in February. In the meantime, listen to these things, grab these resources, that kind of thing. And then I do start promoting in January on my email list. Remember this podcast is coming back. It's coming back, this date. And in the meantime, you should listen to the top 10 episodes from this year because that's a great way to get your brain, activated. Or I'll say, these are great episodes for this time of year. And now that I have like 170 some episodes, I can go back and pull from those and have a nice smattering of different topics,
Yes.
depending on what it is that I'm trying to promote.
Yeah, I think that's so important. You're not just like dropping off the face of the earth. You're
Right.
reminding people like, hey, I have this great bank of episodes. These are some good ones to check out until I come back with new content.
Mhm.
Awesome. Do you see your retention keep up after that break?
I usually get a bump, actually. I
Awesome.
think that people are excited and also maybe they haven't seen the little image on their podcast player and then poop, it pops up again, and so
Yeah.
they're just like, oh, okay. So I think that that has helped. I promoted a lot on social media, probably more than I do throughout the season because sometimes it's hard to maintain that.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I do a little bump in promotion. I do a little bump in the emails. And so I do actually get usually more listeners than I had at my peak last year, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
That's great. That's really good to hear. I know that that's probably a question that people have as they're listening to
Mhm.
this because I've had a lot of people kind of toy with the idea of doing a season and I think people are scared to
Mhm.
put a pause on things for a little bit. So it's really cool to hear about your experience and how it's worked really well for you. Okay, so let's kind of jump into talking about because you've had some sponsors for
Mhm.
your podcast. And I know that this is something that a lot of people, especially in this education niche with podcasting, a lot of people are interested in getting some sponsors for their show. So tell us a little bit about your experience. What has that been like for you?
Sure. I toyed with affiliates before I went into sponsors, and affiliates didn't do a lot for me, to be honest. I mean, it's just somebody has to like stop and go and, use your link and all the stuff. So that one was not as effective for me. And I thought I wasn't sure when I would be ready to hunt for sponsors because I didn't know what any of that industry looked like. And so I actually talked to my VA, and she is a podcast manager. It's one of the things that she focuses on. And so she said, you know what, let me ask around in my groups and things like this. So she asked around and found that with my listens, that there was no reason that I couldn't be getting some sponsors, at a reasonable rate. And I should just try it out. And so we put together a media kit. And we had, statistics in there, generally what the audience is. I probably need to update that actually now with new information because it does change
Yeah.
with audience demographics. I do stay on top of my listens because if those are improving, I want that to be the most current
For
information,
sure.
on the media kit. So then I search for people in my market that are marketing to the same people that I am. And there are some things that are maybe a little more broad, but I haven't had as much response from those people because they maybe have a broad audience, but they know who their target audience is. They're looking for, women, 18 to 24 or whatever. So the ones that I get better response are the ones that are very targeted on instructional coaching. And so I will search for instructional coaching software. I will search for instructional coaching printable and just download to see what there is. I don't want people who are competing directly with the stuff that I sell,
Right.
but I want complementary things.
Yes.
And so I've had several sponsors throughout the second half of last season. It's pretty much whenever I started really targeting that. And it's worked out really well. I do the recording of the ad. I do about a 20, 30-second ad, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how much information they're providing to me that they want to include in the ad. They send over bullet points and I write a draft, they approve it, and it's been great.
That's awesome. I know I have a couple clients who have sponsors and it's nice, especially when it's a host read ad. So you have like control over what you're saying. You get to use your own voice. And so do you record, like and it might vary a little bit, but what do you usually include in your package? Is it like for 4 episodes or what does that look like, if you don't mind sharing?
Sure. Yeah, it's 4 episodes. It's an ad that runs for 4 episodes. And then I also include a mention in the show notes and like the ones that are actually on my website. And then I think I also put it in the app, but so I put it in both places. And then I will also I have 2 packages and the larger one has the IG story and Instagram story as well, where I share about, whatever it is. Sometimes I've done like a little video. Sometimes it's just like a static image and it's not specific. So I can do whatever,
Yeah.
whatever it is, I could do a talking head. So that's kind of how I've structured them as the basic one. I think I want to say it's just 4 episodes with the ad in the episode. And then the higher package has the show notes and the IG story.
Awesome. Do you include emails ever, like mentions in your newsletter?
I have actually done a sponsored email. Somebody asked about that. So I did a sponsored email and I just started making available sponsored episodes, but I didn't want them to be like marmy and icky.
Yes.
But, I've interviewed people who work for companies who that's like dominating everything they do. And that's basically what the sponsored episode sounds like.
Yeah.
If you do it well, I think it can sound like you're just talking to them about this topic and then they mention how their stuff,
absolutely,
no different than what I do, honestly, whenever I'm trying to market something for my own shop or a store.
For sure.
So I've barely made that available because I had 2 people ask about it. And so I thought, you know what, let me think about it. And if it's a company that I think would be a good fit and that I feel like I can actually talk to this person, then I will go ahead and do that. So I've barely made that available like upon request. So
yeah, I'm seeing that a lot more. It seems to be something that companies are super interested in, is having somebody that represents them come on and do an interview. Do you do like flat rate package or is it like a per click kind of thing?
It's a flat rate.
Yeah,
perfect. Because this is going to sound terrible, but I don't know that I'm asking for so much that it would be, it definitely wouldn't be in my interest for it to be per click.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they've agreed, like these people who are interested in marketing on podcasts or advertising, they've actually very quickly agreed. They haven't had any issue with the rate.
Yeah.
And the rate, I don't mind sharing. The rate is $500 for the 4 episodes.
Awesome.
And so if I can get 2 a month, that covers my VA.
Yeah.
So
oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I haven't had 2 every month. Sometimes I do have those spots where I market my own things.
Right.
And that's fine too. But that is the way that it's worked out. We've done the flat rate.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I know that that's something that people are always really curious about. And it's good to hear these examples because if you go straight to Google and Google like how to get a podcast sponsor, you're probably going to come up with the traditional CPM rate, which is like $25 per 1,000 downloads or maybe even less than that. And it's like, okay, well, that's not worth my time. And so I always recommend doing what you do, which is to create these flat rate packages that you get to name the price. And especially, I think it's a huge benefit of having a niched show. Like you have a very clear audience because you can find those really good fit sponsors and they will pay to market on your show. And And you don't have to have a per click because that's what advertising is, right? Like we think about commercials, it's just that exposure, that brand exposure, and people will pay for that. So I think that's awesome. So congrats on landing that. When did you get your first sponsor?
I'm not sure, but it was sometime last season,
Okay.
probably maybe like April or May of
Yeah.
last year.
And now you can now that you have had sponsors, then you can add that to your media kit. And so
Yes,
you
I
can
did.
show people,
Yeah.
I've had sponsors before. So cool. So much opportunity. And I like that you mix it with your own resources too. Like you're also promoting your own stuff.
Yes. And I only do 2 per episode. I don't want a ton. And I don't want I don't want competing. So like SibMe and DigiCoach, not the same, but similar, software. So I don't want to promote those 2 things at the same time.
Right.
So I need to spread out, those kinds of, I mean, it's just, I feel like it's kind of tacky to be
Yeah.
promoting 2 competitors in
Sure.
your same episode. Coke and Pepsi don't like it. So I figured that these people wouldn't like it either.
Yes. So true. So true. Do you usually do for the sponsors? Is it usually a mid roll?
Yeah, I usually do it at the beginning. I was doing it in the middle. And then my husband, who is my podcast editor, because he's like a videographer, AV, all this stuff, he was like, I really think you should just put them at the beginning. And then I talked to my podcast manager because I don't ever just take his advice.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, that's good. That will be fine. So we've been doing that. We just put them at the beginning and it seems to be working out just fine.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Yeah. I hear, mixed things. I've tried mixed things.
Mhm.
And I know some brands will specify like you need to do it
Mhm.
in the mid or pre, or they might like pay different prices, but
Mhm.
awesome. So cool to hear. Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't covered today that you think would be helpful for people?
One thing about sponsorships is I did start putting in my email. There was an article that actually shared about what or downloads podcasts actually get and what percentage you're in
Yeah.
based on that. And I think you've actually shared that one as well, right?
Yep.
So my VA had sent that to me and I was like, you know what? I'm going to start putting that in my email. And so I would link to the article and then tell them the average of listens for like the last 10 or 12 episodes and what percentage we were falling at. And that seems to be working really well to get people interested in the podcast because it's hard to know what you're looking at. You can't tell if you're looking at your podcast player, like how many people are listening to this. There's no way for you to know. And I have that information on the media kit, but it kind of put it into perspective.
Yes.
In terms of where we're falling in the list of, millions of podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good tip. I'll link to like Buzzsprout consistently updates that on their website. I'll link that in the show notes so you all can see, but it's always very reassuring to look at because like you said, as a podcast host, these numbers are not available to the public. So you have no idea where you fall. You probably, knowing most of you who I've talked to, you probably feel like your downloads should be higher. But when you see these numbers, you realize like, hey, I'm doing a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Think about how many podcasts that you loved and then they just stop.
Yes.
So they have like 8 episodes and that's it. And they're just gone, So if you stick it out, more people are going to listen.
Absolutely. And do you include any kind of like I've seen people put some reviews from listeners on their media kit. Do you have anything like that? Any like social proof like that?
I think I do on the bottom have some feedback from listeners. I want to say I have some from Apple Podcasts and then something that somebody just emailed me because people are very nice about sending you emails sometimes and nobody else sees them.
Yes. Yes.
Which, I mean, I appreciate it. So sweet. But then I do feel, and I think you've mentioned this on your podcast as well, ask them, would you mind putting that in
on Apple Podcasts?
Public? Yes. If you want to put that in a public forum, that would be fantastic. And that's happened to me as well on the podcast where I'll have a guest, we'll chat, about the topic for 30 minutes. We get off the episode and then they'll tell me, I just have to tell you, I absolutely loved this resource and this is the change it made in my life. And I'm like,
can I hit record?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's the worst feeling. It's the best and also like, oh, I wish you would have told like literally one other person about this.
Yes. And listen, if that happens, literally ask, like, can we actually talk about that? And I can add this to the episode because it would be really helpful for other people to hear. I had a client do that a few weeks ago and I was like, oh, I'm so happy that you did this. So they just had like the second little recording that we could add into the episode. But yes.
Yeah, I should have. I can think of one in particular that, oh my goodness,
Yes.
I really wish I had it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Chrissy. This has been really cool to hear about your experience. And thank you for all the information about sponsors. It's definitely, everybody's got a slightly different story when it comes to sponsorships and it's not public knowledge. So it's always really helpful to hear how other people are approaching it. Can you tell everybody where they can find you online?
Yes. Yeah. If you head to buzzingwithmissb.com, that's my site and everything is there. Right now, I have a free course for instructional coaches. So if you're an instructional coach, you can get buzzingwithmissb.com/cycles. And I've got a free little mini course that goes right to your email. And of course, the podcast is Instructional Coaching with Miss B.
Perfect. So we'll put all of those links in the episode description and in the show notes so you guys can go check those out. Thank you so much, Chrissy.
Thank you.
Thank you again to Chrissy for sharing about your podcasting journey. I love how Chrissy is using seasons to best plan out her episode content and give herself time to take a break and reflect on her podcast progress. It was also really great to hear about her experience with podcast sponsors. I think this is something that a lot of you can tap into. So if you're interested, go for it. Start by heading to Google, like Chrissy talked about, and finding some good fit companies that you could work with. The worst that can happen is that they don't respond to you or that they say no, and that is okay. And remember, if you are in the Podcasting for Educators Prep School, there is a training in the prep school where podcast marketing expert Jeremy Enns came on and shared all about podcast sponsors and how to create a media kit and all of the stuff that you would need to go ahead and get started with reaching out to podcast sponsors. You can find that in the guest expert module, and he even gives his podcast sponsor toolkit to us for free. All right. Thanks so much for listening, and I will catch you here next week. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. To keep this conversation going, connect with me on Instagram at Podcasting for Educators. I'm always looking for an excuse to talk about podcasting. If you're looking for support in launching, managing, or growing your podcast, check out my online course, the Podcasting for Educators Prep School, at podcastingforeducators.com/prep school. I'll see you here next time.